Who really wrote the Gospels? Some people say the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were just made up later by church leaders. But here's the bigger picture. First, the gospel message was spreading orally before it was ever written down. The apostles were preaching everywhere, and the Gospels were written to preserve that same teaching. That's why they all align, even though each has its own voice. Now, how do we know who wrote them? The earliest Christians tell us. Around 110 AD, Papias, a church leader, said Matthew wrote his gospel and Mark wrote what Peter preached. A few decades later, Irenaeus confirmed the same thing, and he wasn't far removed. He was taught by Polycarp, who had been a student of John himself. That's only one step away from an apostle. But couldn't they have just made it up? Here's why that doesn't work. The Gospels were written while eyewitnesses were still alive. Mark and Luke probably in the 60s, Matthew and John before the end of the first century. If false names were attached, those eyewitnesses and the first churches could have pushed back and said, "That's not true," but no one ever did. Also, Christianity spread quickly across the Roman Empire. Rome, Africa, Syria, Greece. If authorship was just a rumor, we'd expect different churches to have different names. Instead, everywhere you look, the testimony is the same. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. No rival claims exist. That kind of universal agreement is almost impossible if it began as a lie. And the writings themselves match the men. Matthew notices money details, a tax collector's eye. Mark's style is short and urgent, like Peter preaching on the move. Luke's polished Greek includes medical terms, just what you'd expect from a doctor. John's gospel is deeply personal, written like someone close to Jesus. So why trust it? Because history, timing, universal agreement, and the text itself all line up. The Gospels weren't anonymous myths. They were written by the very people the early church said they were: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And even if we didn't know the exact names, it wouldn't change the truth. What matters most is the message all four agree on: that Jesus lived, died, and rose again.